Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 18th of October 2012 and it's just gone 2 o'clock. We're here on the UK Column website and on TNS. Good afternoon, Brian.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine. It's been a little bit of a tight schedule to get today's programme together. Anything could happen, I think, is the answer.
And what's the weather doing today?
The weather's been atrocious, really. We've had some very, very heavy, violent rain showers actually throughout the morning, and it looks like that's going to continue. So rain, I think the forecast is rain. Indeed. With possibly some sunshine and maybe a few grey skies.
Great. Where are we going to go first? With myself?
Well, we've tried to pack quite a bit in here. I think you've picked up on this Mumbai style attack, which is very, very interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting. It's also, I had a look on the RUSI, R-U-S-I, is a think tank, and James Brookenshaw, who is a minister, was speaking at the RUSI conference, and he has said that Britain needs to be ready for a terror attack in whatever form it takes. The Home Secretary, Theresa May, has asked emergency services to take further improvements to the joint response. And in a speech to security experts at RUSI in central London, Mr Brookenshaw said the Olympics had been a security success story, even though there were rumours of terrorist attacks, that could have taken place. This think tank RUSI has warned this year that the UK could face growing threat from a lone wolf terrorist returning from fighting overseas. So are they trying to prepare us for something, or is there a serious threat here, would you say, Brian?
What do you think?
I don't think there's a serious threat. I think they're trying to put fear in us. We know, with all these TSAs trying to stop terrorism, they haven't caught one terrorist going through these TSA machines. Yeah. And as we say, we had all that drama at the Olympics. I mean, we had Ben Fellows here as well, who said there was coffins coming into the country, and whether it was because there was so much exposure of what was going on at the Olympics. But
well, I agree. I
think it's scare tactic.
I agree with you completely. And Mike, you've got something to come in on.
Well, I would say that I agree with you as well, except that of course Syria is the training ground for the next batch of Al-Qaeda terrorists, or should we say patsies.
Yeah.
And we've got another story coming up, actually, with regards to a patsy that's just been picked up in America, but I'll save that until we get there.
Yeah, for me, I think it's becoming increasingly clear that what's going on is we're being led. This is nudging on a strategic scale. So it's 1984, the book, that is, that we live in a constant fear and reports of violence and war. And I think that this is the government absolutely using applied psychology on the public as a whole to get us into this fearful state that we're constantly going to be attacked by terrorists who, the definition of the terrorists is always very vague. Yeah. One minute it's going to be Al-Qaeda, the next minute it's going to be Islamic extremists. We're never given any real detail as to who these people are. But one thing's for sure, in my opinion, if we see an incident with guns on the street, people are killed with guns, this is the government desperate to actually try and remove the last vestiges of weapons from the British people. Of course, the same thing is being attempted in America, but luckily the American general public is still extremely well armed. And I think more and more of them are realising that if they get rid of their guns, they are at the complete mercy of the government. Of course, we, the British, have acted like lambs, so all the weapons have been taken away from us. But yes, my personal opinion is that this is the government actually lining up for something in order to introduce more
Big Brother,
and a more intense crackdown. And of course, the thing which people need to remember is the Civil Contingencies Act, that if it's brought in fully, it is just equivalent to Hitler's Enabling Act, and we won't be able to do anything. So we really need to start questioning our own government on what this is and where this propaganda is coming from.
Absolutely. Moving on.
Well,
so
Russia, Russia Today.
Russia Today, it is all
yeah.
over the place on the mainstream, that the FBI and the New York Police Department have thwarted a plan for the bombing of the Federal Reserve. Now, I'm not sure if the mainstream, BBC and co, have picked up on the fact that a 20-year-old man called Quasi Nafis has reported to have conspired with undercover officers working for both the FBI and the New York Police Department in an effort to blow up the bank branch, but local NBC 4 says the public was never at risk. On Wednesday afternoon, Mr. Nafis was charged with attempting to use a weapon of mass destruction and attempting to provide material to support an Al-Qaeda attack. Authorities allegedly provided the man with fake explosives and insisted him in constructing the full plot after online posts that he'd put on online asking, wanting a jihad. So the FBI and the New York Police Department helped this 21-year-old lad to, well, attempt to blow up the Federal Reserve. So by the looks of him, in my opinion, was he just a patsy set up?
Well, again, I'm going to agree on this one. If you look at it, what is actually going on here, we've got the American police assisting somebody to set up a crime and then basically announcing to the world what a tremendous job we've done, because we've helped set up a crime and we've helped diffuse it. And I think this is more of the same. I'm fascinated that the target is supposed to be the Federal Reserve Bank.
Yes.
Does that fit in with the fact that people are now beginning to point fingers at the sheer utter corruption of the international monetary system? And of course the Federal Reserve System itself has been exposed very clearly as being a totally fraudulent organisation.
That's never been audited. That's
never been audited, and I think I'm right in saying nobody's too sure how much gold, if any, still exists in the reserve.
I know Ron Paul was saying there wasn't much gold left in there, and Gerald Salente, I think, from Trends Research, I think he's saying similar. Yeah.
Well, maybe the Federal Reserve gets blown up and of course they can say, well, there was gold there but it's all disappeared in the explosion.
Convenient, wouldn't
it? Would be a little bit equivalent to 9/11. A serious subject, but we're just giving it a little bit of humour because really it seems to us that this is our respective governments, Britain and America, trying to pull the wool over people's eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
Once again, absolutely. Well, here's a very interesting gentleman, Mr. Cameron, as we pointed out in our news item yesterday, that he's now being described in the mainstream press as a liar. What a thing to call this gentleman. And here we have David Cameron, who's now apparently off to Europe to meet with Eurosceptics. For me, this whole article just reeks of propaganda, because if we follow David Cameron's career, of course, everything that he's done has been totally pro the EU supranational state. And even the description itself of Eurosceptic seems to me, and I know many other people think this as well, Eurosceptic is simply a smokescreen. It gives the idea that you're against the European project, but in fact you're not really doing anything substantial to help stand up against it. So I think that this is a pure propaganda exercise by David Cameron, so that he can try and placate some of the people in his party who are beginning to wake up to the reality that the European Union is a dictatorship. I think he's trying to cover his back on this one. But we'll wait and see how that develops. This is a little bit of focus on the MPs themselves, and UK Column Live has been trying to point out for some years now that what we're really dealing with is the fact that we have criminals in positions of power. And here we have the Speaker, John Bercow, trying to block the release of MPs' expenses. It's not just picked up by The Guardian as this one, but also The Telegraph is picking up on the same thing. They give a little bit more detail in their subheading that the Speaker of the House of Commons is attempting to block the publication of MPs' expenses. that are believed to show that some rent their taxpayer-funded homes to each other. So once again, this is a key issue of transparency. The MPs are taking public money. We know that they are untrustworthy and criminal because we've already seen that in the previous exposure. And here we are, somebody's getting a sniff of another scam, that you take money from the taxpayer and then you rent your home out to another member of Parliament. Where's the evidence? Well, of course, what we're seeing is Parliament block off the route to the evidence by saying we're not going to give you the information. Why would you want to do this? I think it's becoming more and more clear that the corruption is very, very serious indeed. David Laws, the gentleman standing at the lectern in the photo that's just been on screen, I noticed that on the front of the lectern with the Lib Dem, thanks Mike for popping that back up, with the Lib Dem logo, it says fairer tax in tough times. So presumably what this gentleman means is that I can fiddle my expenses, I can take public money, and then we'll give you an even tougher tax and you can consider it fair. You can say it's hypocrisy, but I think what we're basically starting to look at is blatant criminal activity by our politicians, and if they're prepared to do it to the British general public, they're going to be prepared to do it overseas.
Yeah, can I just quickly say, apparently the UK column site's down. People at TNS are just letting us know that no one can watch the live stream. So just to let you know, Mike.
Yeah, it's not the server. It's something bigger on the internet. So basically the. I'll say again.
Yeah,
it's not the server. It's something bigger on the internet. The name ukcolumn.org cannot be resolved. It's not, the domain name has not expired, I can promise you that.
Okay.
It's something to do with name servers, and they are managed by somebody else. So as soon as the show's over, I'll get that sorted out. But
but people can listen in. They haven't got the video stream though.
Okay.
Okay, so people can listen into the show at TNS. So pictures you're putting up don't mean much at the moment.
Okay, I'll describe the pictures from
No, remember being recorded, so the archive will be up.
All right, well, we're not too sure what's going on, whether as a result of our news programmes the government's decided to take some action and interfere with the internet, we don't know. But of course that's what's coming for all of us unless we fully expose the people in Parliament.
Absolutely.
The Independent, another good story here, which is actually talking on the quality of the people in Westminster. Miliband pounces, well I think that's unlikely, but Miliband pounces, backbenchers despair, survives for another day. And this of course is the story of Andrew Mitchell, the man who described the police outside Westminster as plebs. He's then refused to say what he actually did and did not say. Some people have interpreted that he's lying. But what's happened with this man? Does he lose his job? Is he demoted? Is he pushed to one side? Is he disgraced? No. David Cameron stands by him. And so we have yet more evidence of the shocking morality, really, of the people in Parliament.
I wonder what the police say, must think about this, and what sort of what's the word? But you know, what does the police think of Cameron? It doesn't give them much confidence. I can imagine. The
day that sticks in my mind is when the unions had the big demonstration up in London, and I was in London. They had police ringing Westminster, shoulder to shoulder around Westminster, which shows you just how scared the politicians are. And when I went along to speak to those policemen and women, who were, I'm going to say 95% of them were extremely nice, pleasant and friendly. But at one stage an older lady said to one of the police officers, the trouble is that you're doing what you're doing to us, but the criminals are in there. And she was pointing into Westminster. And the policeman said with a big smile on his face, don't worry, love, when the time comes, we know where the criminals are. And that was, I think, a heartfelt comment by a British bobby. And it gives me great heart that within the police force there are clearly people that are seen through these politicians.
Definitely.
I'm hogging this a bit at the moment, but we're just about to hand over to Mike, but this is really Prince Charles who is staying in the limelight, and I think that's absolutely right. The Guardian here is picking up on the story that at the moment they've been unable to lever out his private letters, lobbying letters to politicians and people in positions of power and influence. And the story they've got here is that this was showing him having met with Tessa Jowl, and he was busy talking about New Deal policy. Now, for those of you that have followed the so-called regeneration programme in UK, in many of our major cities, once the New Deal programme was introduced, we started to see not so much regeneration and charitable good works going into the deprived areas. What started to happen was a flood of fraud and corruption. And in many cities, Plymouth's one of them, but we could talk about Sheffield, we could talk about Manchester or Glasgow.
I think it'd be quicker to name the ones that aren't involved.
Well, all the major cities were involved in this programme, that once it started to go in, the problems started. And of course, what we don't know is really where this whole New Deal policy came from. The government claims it's Labour policy, but actually it goes much deeper than that. It's United Nations policy. And if we're talking United Nations, then we're back saying, well, what is Prince Charles doing? He considers himself to be Prince of Europe. Presumably that's the Dark Prince of Europe. But what is this man up to in the background?
Oh, he's keeping things secret.
Yeah, we know Guardian is often totally aligned with government policy, but in this case they seem to be following the right line, which is just what is the truth about the documentation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Mike, I think you've got a few articles here talking about the honesty and truth and morality of the BBC.
Not just the BBC, but the government in general. We didn't comment on the fact that I think it was Tuesday, the Office for National Statistics announced 2.2% inflation, so that was a further fall in inflation. And if you go to the next, you're right. So that's the point. Bunch of liars, a lot of them. So the government are lying, the Office for National Statistics are lying, and the BBC is lying. And so why am I saying that? The reason that I'm saying that is, if you hit the next slide there, last night on Watchdog, they proved that the BBC knows very well what's going on here. So give me the next one. So they had, there's Anne Robinson and her sidekick there, showing 3 packages of Ariel washing up liquid, and making the point that 6 months ago a package of Ariel washing up liquid was a litre. That 3 months ago it was 900 millilitres. That today it's 800 millilitres, but that the price has not changed.
Isn't that fraud?
You might argue that it is,
right,
but it's certainly fraudulent on the part of the, or at least, at the very least, disingenuous on the part of the Office for National Statistics, because what they're saying is that the inflation rate has not changed, and they're basing that on a basket of goods, where they're taking the price of a basket of goods, and the basket of goods may well include a package of Ariel washing up liquid. And so the price hasn't changed on that, and therefore the inflation figure doesn't appear to go up. In fact, 20% less in the package is a significant rise in price, and they're ignoring that and pretending that there is no rise in price. So that's why I'm calling them liars. Let's move on from that. The key point here is the BBC are liars, because Watchdog has known about this from 2010. And this slide is showing a screenshot from their website from an article in 2010 saying big names, smaller products, where they're highlighting the fact that even in 2010 these companies were reducing the size of their products and keeping the price the same. Now, is it Procter & Gamble? I can't remember if it's Procter & Gamble, but the company behind Ariel said on TV last night that this was as a result of rising commodities prices, and of course that's exactly the point that we've been making on UK Column Live for quite some time, that rising commodities prices are having a major effect on our basics, the basic things that we need to live, and you know, the headline inflation figure is not reflecting that, and of course that impacts everything. It impacts our pay rises, it impacts our benefits, it impacts our pensions, and lying, fraud, call it what you will, it's having a direct impact on the lives of everyone.
But the lie, my interpretation of the lie is that we are being drifted the line that everything is okay, whilst in fact everything is slowly crumbling away around us. So there is a political purpose to the lie, which is actually to cover up the true state of the country at the moment.
And the true state of the financial system and the economy. Yeah.
Well, and the fact that they're saying that more people are in work than there have been in so many years, the fact that people are underemployed.
We're just going to come on to that.
Oh, okay.
Brilliant.
You carry on.
Brilliant. Into the next slide.
Okay.
So basically unemployment, it's all rosy according to the BBC, and who are again lying.
Yeah.
So
we just explained that we've lost a little bit of technical capability today, which is why we're...
the column website.
But luckily my finger on the button is still working here. We'll go on to the next one.
Right, okay, so again, Office for National Statistics, they produced the unemployment figures yesterday. And the BBC, of course, was saying how everything was rosy. We've got more people in work than we've ever had before. Unemployment has come down by 50,000, big deal, and so on. So let's just have a wee look at some of the figures. And the first graph that we've got here is showing output per worker and unit labour costs going back several years. And what it's showing is that since the middle of 2011, there has been a 2% fall in the output per worker in this country, which means, you know, that they're pretending to us that if they base their valuation of a recession on GDP, that the GDP fell by something like, you know, 0.4% in the last quarter, or 0.2%. I can't remember what the figure was. What this is showing is that the situation was quite a bit worse, because each worker in the country was producing a significant amount less than it was a year ago.
Yeah.
Than they were a year ago. Let's see the next one then. And then this next slide, again from the same report, is showing the breakdown or the change in the last month between, seasonally. Of course, everything's seasonally adjusted, whatever that means. It basically means that they get to fiddle the figures a bit. So this is changes in the number of people in the labour market between June to August 2007 and June to August 2012. So they're trying to show this, compare the two 3-month periods between 2007 and 2012. And what we see is that there are 355,000 less people in full-time employment in the UK since, you know, compared to the same period in 2007. There are 724,000 more people in part-time employment. And that, to me, says it all. This is the reason that we have more people in employment today than we've ever had in the past, because we're replacing, as we've mentioned before, but this demonstrates that we're replacing high-quality, full-time, permanent employment with low-quality, part-time, shelf-stacking, coffee-making, this kind of part-time job. People can't get full-time jobs anymore, and they're having to take part-time jobs. Yeah,
and of course there are pension penalties as well with the part-time job. So, yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
And now we've got that law that's in force, isn't it? Anyone over the age of 22 has to go in and start paying into this pension as well. Now, even if they are in a part-time job, is that not right, Mike?
This is the privatisation of the state pension system. Yes, absolutely. Okay, and then the next slide then is showing economic inactivity. Now, economic inactivity is basically somebody who is not, it's nothing to do with people spending money, it's to do with who is actually contributing to the economy through their labour. And so this graph is showing, it's a pie chart, and it's showing that people that aren't actually contributing to the workforce in any way, and so that's showing that we've got 2.2 million students in this country. We've got 2.3 million people looking after somebody in their family or in home. We've got 2.2 million, 2 million or so long-term sick. We've got 1.43 million retired people, and then they've got 1 million others that they call other, and that's a very large chunk of the population of the country. You know, we've only got 60 million people in the country or so, and 1 million of those are inactive in some way for some reason, which is considered other, and it's not explained what that is, at least in the high level area of the report. So I think we need to find out what that means, and perhaps we might find that 1 million, 1.05 million others should really be on the unemployment statistics, and perhaps the unemployment statistics aren't quite as rosy as being made out to be. Yeah.
There's something else I comment on this thing, is that of course we have people who are doing an absolutely critical fundamental job looking after the family home, looking after a home and children, bringing up children. They are dismissed as economic inactivity. I find it a very derogatory and cynical look at the country. If you're involved in a household, if you're involved in a family, well, actually, you're not worth anything to us because you're not active.
Well, it's particularly cynical since if you're a parent bringing up children, you're bringing up the next generation of little slaves that are going to work in the labour market. So.
Well, and of course, if you've got somebody who can only bring in, who's only able to bring in an income via a part-time job, then the chances are that both parents are going to end up working in order to bring the income in. So there's some very I'm going to use the word sinister things going on here in the way the government simply looks at the general public as workers. Yeah. Well, that's your last graph, is it? Or one more to go?
You tell me.
Well, we've had a few technical problems here, so there's one more to go.
One more graph, Mike.
Quarterly change.
Oh yes,
this was very significant.
This is really significant. Yes, this is the other thing that really needs to be highlighted: the quarterly change in public sector employment and a quarterly change in private sector employment. And there's two. Each bar has two colours: a black colour and a blue colour. And in each case, the blue colour is about the same. And the blue box is called effective reclassification. And what this looks like is that we have lost in the last quarter 200,000 people or so out of the public sector as a result of reclassification. So in other words, the jobs haven't gone, they've just been reclassified as private sector jobs. And so this looks very much like an excellent demonstration of the privatisation of public sector workers. Yeah. Public sector workers are finding themselves no longer working for the public sector. They end up being their contracts of employment being changed to work for Serco or some other outsourcing company, and they then move over into the quarterly change in private sector employment. And so, what I'm interested to know, aside from the fact that it demonstrates the privatisation of so much of our public sector, I would be interested to know whether that is considered, if a job is reclassified in that way, if that is considered a new private sector job or not.
Well, what would be absolutely excellent is if UK Column Live viewers and listeners might care to challenge the BBC over some of the facts and figures that we've presented today. And of course, a key man is common purpose guru, Mr. Peston, Robert Peston, who of course only talks on the very high level stories he's actually presumably fed by the international banking contacts up there in the city. So if you're picking up on what we're talking about today, which is really either blatant dishonesty by the BBC and the government in how it's talking about the economic situation, or what we're watching is pure propaganda. Either way, if you'd like to do something about it, please will you get on to whoever, your local MP, local councillors or your local BBC office, and see whether you can get some answers out of them. And of course we would be extremely interested to receive emails or information that we can follow up on and rebroadcast.
Yeah,
it's a team effort, I think. Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Mike. We just move on with a story which we've taken the Sun's lead on it to share news from the papers around a little bit. Some people are treating this story as if it's a little bit of a joke, but a blind man gets tasered by the police. He's then on the ground, he's knelt on, he's handcuffed. And why? Because there was a report of somebody with a sword, a samurai sword, and the police mistook his white stick as a samurai sword. They didn't stop him and check him. They didn't drive past so that they could view him properly and decide whether this was an armed man or not. They simply fired a taser. And of course these weapons are now available to the police in very large numbers. A former police officer has told me that in reality these things should be handled exactly the same as a handgun. They should be signed in and out under the same rules. But what we're now starting to see is really that the police seem to regard these very, very dangerous pieces of equipment as almost a toy. Because if you do read the safety reports written on tasers, the dangers of these weapons to people with pacemakers, to people with the risk of strokes, as indeed this gentleman had, or other physical weaknesses, is very severe. So at the moment we've got the situation where the police are either so poorly trained that they take this violent action without checking first, or else they are presumably following an ACPO, Association of Chief Police Officers, policy where they're going to shoot first and ask questions later. Either way, we the public need to be asking the real questions. Who is training our police officers, and how are they actually training to make them so incompetent and or brutal?
They've probably been trained by G4S, haven't they?
That could well be true. What we do know is that many of the training consultancies being let loose on the police force are using neuro-linguistic programming, and the police themselves are not even aware of the dangers of this type of political indoctrination. Scary stuff. This is a little bit scary as well, actually.
This is really scary. I couldn't believe it when I read this earlier. Apparently, scientists have been doing some research into blood, and mice injected with elderly mice injected with younger mice blood seems to stop the aging process. A new study by researchers at Stanford University showed that injections of young blood can reverse the signs of aging in mice. The experiment is as simple as it sounds. Give an old mouse a syringe full of blood from a young mouse and run some tests. The leader of the research team has said that they found that the boost of youth improved learning and memory in the elder mice. So this is really, this is sort of, you know, something out of one of these TV shows, True Blood or something. Yeah. That, you know, you get these load of vampires that have been around for ages, getting all the young in and sucking their blood to keep them young. It's a pretty scary, it's a little scary story, I think. I can see you there, Mike. I was just going to say, I always pick up on two things, that these stories always come out of the same place. So this one's Stanford University. So I pick up on the university that produces the story, and then my mind says to me that this is being released to the public now, but it's something actually that's been going on in the background. And I'm extremely worried at the mentality of the people who are getting into this type of research. Can I just say that apparently in The Guardian, a gentleman called Kim Jong-il used to inject himself with blood from healthy young virgins in a bid to slow his aging process down. But this was in the past. So this is what's frightening, you know. Well, we're laughing about it, and I think quite a lot of people will smile because it has a humoristic side to it. But in reality, dark. I think something very dark is going on. What's your opinion, Mike?
Well, I'm would suggest or highlight the fact Prince Charles has a great interest in Transylvania. He's got property over there.
Right.
We know the history of Transylvania and its legends. So I just draw a flippant.
A flippant, semi-serious comment there. Yeah, but there's something a bit worrying about.
Somebody
as well.
did post earlier, because I put this article up onto Facebook, and somebody posted up, that's why Margaret Thatcher's still alive. Somebody posted that, and there's similar comments going through in the chat box.
Just ask if they can provide evidence, please. If you give us the evidence, we'll report the story. Now, we're moving on to, moving back onto some pretty serious stuff that's going on in Europe at the moment. And the UK column's line on this is, of course, that the mainstream press in Britain are simply not reporting what's happening. The Daily Mail pointing out here that in Greece there's a rise of right-wing thugs, really, parties, but thugs, who are actually now running rampant on the streets. So it seems to me that in the last 5 years, but certainly since Greece has been part of the European Union, Greece has gone from being a poor but largely happy, stable country with a lot of sunshine and blue seas into some very dark political activity inside the country. This is just a picture from the Mail of some of those what am I going to call them? I'm going to say young men at this stage on the street, but the story is talking about immigrants in Greece being attacked and beaten up. And really the picture here is, of course, of violence, which is what is starting to erupt right away across the European Union. David Cameron appeasing the Eurosceptics by a visit to Europe, which we've mentioned earlier. But in reality, the British public are not being told anything that's going on in the background. Mike, would we be able to play one of those little video clips or not?
I wasn't able to get it done in time. So.
Okay, all right. Well, we will do that another time, but there have been some extremely interesting video clips of demonstrations in Spain in particular, which have appeared on YouTube. And not only do some of those clips show unbelievable violence and aggression by the Spanish police, where young students, men and women, boys and girls, are being simply beaten by the police. There's no violent action on the part of the students, you just see the police laying into them. But there are also some very, very interesting film clips where it's obvious that the Spanish police are so intimidated by a quiet, well-behaved and peaceful crowd that they retreat back into their vehicles. And for me, if you go onto YouTube and search out some of these clips, but when you see a quiet, peaceful but massive crowd simply able to reduce the police to basically cowed silence, that is what peaceful protest is all about. So
it was quite similar to what happened at Birkenhead, actually.
That's absolutely true. But just for those who may still not have seen it, if you go onto YouTube and call up "Arrest of the Judge at Birkenhead," you can see film clips. When that event took place, there were roughly 600 people on the street, totally peaceful, talking, in some cases laughing and joking with the police, whilst a judge was arrested, running an unlawful court. But of course none of that activity was reported by mainstream press and media, and that really for us said the power of these peaceful, quiet but well-attended protests. This is really the way for people who are not happy with what's going on in the country to express their unhappiness.
Where did we have the pictures last week? We had some pictures up of people dressed up in Nazi gear parading on...
that was Greece.
Was that Greece? No.
Yes, it was. Yeah, Merkel's visit.
Oh, of course it was, yeah. Okay.
Okay. Well, that brings us to the end of the...
Did you just or not?
I'm afraid I haven't got that one for you. Okay. Technology has beaten us today,
It has beaten us today, okay.
Just describe.
I will, I'll just go. There's The Independent, I'll show it up on The Independent. you'll be able to see it. But Jeremy Hunt had to go off to the palace, and he met the Queen, and he tried making a joke as the Queen came down, shaking people's hands. He said to her, "I read about the Japanese tourists who said afterwards how wonderful our Queen was. Queen must be to take part in that jump out of the plane, as they would never get their emperor to jump out of one." So he was trying to make it as a joke. She didn't get it, and then Jeremy Hunt was approached by the Duke of Edinburgh, who just walked up to her and said, "Who are you?" And onlookers were saying Jeremy Hunt looked very snubbed and very disappointed by the whole thing, and embarrassed.
Yeah.
So
well,
that was a bit of light-hearted news.
My comment on this is that if the comment by the Japanese tourist is true, of course, that the whole of the Olympics charade. I'm not a supporter of all the hype around the Olympics, but did that put our Queen in a good light? I don't think so. I think it reduced it to cartoon status. Absolutely. But there we are. Okay. You sure we've finished now?
Finished, yeah,
okay. That brings us to the end of the news section of today's programme. We are going to move on, and we're going to be looking at the subject of child abuse. Now, I can say that many of our viewers are very supportive of what we're doing by sticking with this subject, and we know other people at the moment are curious as to why we're spending so much time. And our answer to this is that if we start to look at the sheer fraud and corruption and criminal activity which is being carried out not only within Westminster but by people in positions of high power and influence, and we start to look at the mechanism by which these people are able to work in networks, they're able to control people, they're able to block investigations, they're able to buy the silence of people. The answer is that we come back to this very, very terrible and dark subject of the abuse of children. And as Senator Sevray from Jersey has said, that paedophilia is basically the mechanism by which governments can control people to do their bidding. And our view, and of course if you research yourself, which we always encourage you to do, if you research this subject, you will find that in countries across the world, people are warning about what is happening to children and what has been happening to children. And they are also reporting that it is on a massive scale and that the trafficking and the links go between countries. So this is a key part of the subject that we're trying to raise awareness on. If we can understand what is actually happening to our children and young people, we are well on the way to understanding just how the criminal elite in power are controlling us. So we're going to begin this afternoon, hopefully, with a film clip of a Byzantine Catholic priest speaking out. And this is a 20-minute film clip from YouTube. The gentleman speaks and then a lady is interpreting what he's saying. I'm going to say to you, please listen very, very carefully to what this gentleman is talking about. I think you will be astonished not only at what he says, but where ultimately it leads. So that's going to be a 20-minute film clip, and once that's over, we're going to introduce two guests, Yvonne Stewart-Taylor, who's been with us before, and she's from Cumbria, and another lady called Sheena Williams, who'll be speaking to us hopefully from Kent. I say hopefully because we have been having a few problems with technology. But those two ladies, tremendous experience and courage and bravery in tackling what's been happening with children in Britain.
Can I just say that for the TNS listeners, there is a player now. If you just scroll underneath the chat box, there's now our player that people can watch it. The listeners on TNS can listen in.
Right, okay. So over to Mike, and please listen very carefully to the film clip you're about to see.
Byzantský katolický patriarchát jménem všech pravověrných křesťanů světa vyjadřuje podporu rodičovským organizacím 193 členských států OSN.
The Byzantine Catholic Patriarchate, on behalf of all true Christians of the world, expresses support to parents' organizations of the 193 UN member states.
Rodiče se v těchto dnech obrátili s radikálním protestem na výbor OSN pro takzvaná práva dítěte.
In these days, parents have turned to the United Nations Committee on the so-called Rights of the Child with a radical protest.
Ve dnech 17.9. až 5.10.2012 probíhá zasedání výboru OSN v Ženevě.
Committee session is being held from the 17th of September to the 5th of October 2012 in Geneva.
Rodičovské organizace vznesly celosvětový protest proti politice OSN.
Parents' organizations published a document entitled Global Protest Against the UN Policies.
Protest je namířen proti brutálnímu rvaní dětí z rodin.
The protest is directed against brutal removals of children from their families.
Je provázen internetovou peticí.
It is connected with an internet petition.
Vinou vedení OSN již miliony dětí nenávratně ztratili své milující rodiče.
The United Nations is to blame for millions of children having irretrievably lost their loving parents.
Duševní a psychické škody způsobené dětem a rodičům jsou nevyjadřitelné a nevyčíslitelné.
Mental damage caused to children and parents is incalculable and inexpressible.
Hrůzostrašné a šokující statistiky uvádějí.
Scary and shocking statistics show.
Každý týden jedna rodina jen v 5milionovém Finsku páchá rodinnou sebevraždu v následku psychického stresu způsobeného zločinci juvenální justice a současnými piráty sociálních služeb.
Every week one family in 5 million Finland commits family suicide as a consequence of psychological stress caused by juvenile justice criminals and contemporary pirates of the social services.
Ve Finsku jsou tyto rodinné sebevraždy už masovým jevem.
In Finland, these family suicides have become a mass phenomenon.
Desítky otců zabili své děti, jejich matky i sami sebe v děsivé panice z juvenálníků, kteří se jako teroristé prolámovali do jejich bytů a domů.
Dozens of fathers have killed their children, their mothers and themselves in abject panic when juvenile workers broke into their houses like terrorists.
Tyto statistiky jsou přísně utajovány.
These statistics are strictly classified.
Za medializací jsou rodiče krutě trestáni.
Parents are severely penalized for mass media disclosure.
Přesto se některé případy nepodařilo utajit a byly zveřejněny.
In spite of that, some cases failed to be concealed and were published.
V dubnu 2011 ve městě Ikalinen otec zastřelil svou ženu, syna a pak sám sebe, když se bestiální juvenálníci vlamovali do jeho domu.
In April 2011, in the town of Ikalinen, a father shot his wife, son and then himself while bestial juvenile justice workers were breaking into their house.
V říjnu 2011 ve městě Varkaus otec rodiny zabil svou ženu a 10letého syna nožem, když státní patronát demoloval dveře domu.
In October 2011 in Varkaus, a father of the family killed his wife and 10-year-old son with a knife when social patronage workers were demolishing the entrance door.
V listopadu 2011 ve stejné situaci otec zabil své 2 děti v obci Tyronovo.
In November 2011, a father in the same situation killed his 2 children in the village of Tyronovo.
V prosinci 2011 ve městě Vantaa otec zabil 5letou a 8letou dceru v situaci, kdy se sociální pracovníci blížili k jejich domu, aby jim ukradli děti.
In December 2011 in Vantaa, a father killed his 5- and 8-year-old daughters when social workers approached their house to steal their children.
V prosinci 2011, když juvenálka vylamovala dveře, zoufalá matka zabila 5měsíční a 3letou dceru ve městě Kouvola.
In December 2011 in Kouvola, when juvenile justice workers were breaking down the door, the desperate mother killed her 5-month-old and 3-year-old daughters.
Anastázie Zavgorodné ve městě Vanta a orgány státního patronátu 7. září 2012 násilně ukradli 4 děti, 6letou dceru, dvojčata, která měla 2 roky a nakonec i novorozeně.
On the 7th of September 2012, social patronage bodies in Vanta forcibly stole 4 children from Anastasia Zavgorodnaya, 6-year-old daughter, 2-year-old twins and a newborn baby.
Nejdříve 6letou dceru sociální pracovníci odvezli do Helsinek, kam za ní rodiče přijeli.
The social workers first took the 6-year-old daughter to Helsinki, where her parents arrived sometime later.
Matka svědčí, Veronika plakala, já jsem se jí držela.
The mother testifies, Veronica was crying, I was holding her.
Pak sociální pracovníci zavolali policii a ta vyrvala dítě z mých rukou.
Then the social workers called the police, who snatched the child from my arms.
Mě chytli za ruce a násilně táhli po chodbě.
They grabbed my hands and dragged me down the hallway.
Byla jsem v 9. měsíci těhotenství, čekala jsem narození 4. dítěte.
I was in the 9th month of pregnancy. I was expecting my 4th child.
Manžela povalili na podlahu, ruce mu dali za záda a nasadili želízka.
They knocked my husband down on the floor, put his hands behind his back and put handcuffs on him.
Odvezli nás na policejní stanici a vyžadovali po nás pokutu za to, že jsme bránili své děti.
They took us to the police station and demanded that we should pay a fine for having defended our children.
Tím jsme prý odporovali policii, která se ale na nás dopouštěla zločinu.
We thus allegedly resisted the police, but they were committing a crime against us.
Bylo nám oznámeno, že za našimi 2letými dvojčaty nemusíme spěchat, protože sociální služba nám je už odebrala.
We were told that we did not need to hurry back home to our 2-year-old twins because the social services had already removed them from us.
Týden po narození sociální služba ukradla i novorozeně.
A week after the birth, the social services stole the newborn baby too.
Tento zločinný systém, takzvaný státní patronát, byl již například z OSN závazně zaveden ve všech zemích Evropy.
This criminal system, so-called social patronage, has already been introduced in all countries of Europe on the binding command of the United Nations.
Statistiky udávají, že ve Francii má juvenálka na svědomí 2 miliony umělých sirotků.
The statistics indicate that the juvenile justice system in France has by now 2 million artificial orphans on its conscience.
Norsko má pouze 1 milion dětí.
Norway has only 1 million children.
Z nich je už 200 000 ukradeno, to znamená každé 5. dítě.
200,000 of these children have already been stolen. That means every 5th child.
V Norsku je denně kradeno 33 dětí.
33 children are stolen in Norway every day.
Ročně páchá sebevraždu průměrně 59 takto odebraných dětí z rodin.
Annually, an average of 59 children who were torn from their families commit suicide.
Statistiky sebevražed matek se už ani neuvádějí.
Suicide statistics of mothers are not even published anymore.
Ve Finsku bylo v roce 2011 odebráno jen z úplných rodin 16 500 dětí.
In Finland, 16,500 children were removed just from 2-parent families within the year 2011.
Děti odebrané milujícím rodičům jsou sexuálně zneužívány, sociální služby s nimi obchodují a dostávají velké sumy peněz od státu za každé uloupené dítě.
Children removed from their loving parents are sexually abused. The social services traffic in these children and obtain vast sums of money from the state for each child stolen.
Na brutálním zacházení s dětmi po jejich pirátské krádeži milujícím rodičům nese hlavní vinu nejzločinnější organizace v historii lidstva a tou je dnes OSN.
The main culprit who bears the blame for the brutal treatment of children after they were piratically stolen from their loving parents is the most criminal organization in the history of mankind, namely the United Nations.
Na těchto masových zločinech proti lidskosti se rovněž podílí celosvětová zednářské lože, světoví bankéři, mezinárodní takzvané dobročinné organizace, soudní systém, sociální služby a organizace na takzvanou ochranu dětí.
Participants in these mass crimes against humanity are the worldwide Masonic Lodge, World Bankers, international so-called charitable organizations, the judicial system, social services, and organizations for so-called child protection.
20. září 2012 se v Německu konala demonstrace a pochod proti juvenální justici a takzvaným sociálním službám.
On the 20th of September 2012, a demonstration with a march was held in Germany against the juvenile justice system and the so-called social services.
Němečtí bojovníci vyzvali společnost. Lidé, povstaňte.
German fighters called upon the society. People, rise up.
Prezidentem Brazílie byl podepsán antijuvenální zákon 12318/10, který chrání děti i rodiče a trestá sociální služby, pokud by kradli děti rodičům.
President of Brazil signed an anti-juvenile act number 12318/10, which protects children and parents and penalizes the social services in case they steal children from their parents.
Kéž je to příkladem prezidentům Ruska, Ukrajiny a všech národů světa.
Let it be an example to the presidents of Russia, Ukraine and all the nations of the world.
Prezidenti, povstaňte.
Presidents, rise up.
Je mezinárodním podvodem a cynickým výsměchem nazývat právem dítěte tyto nejkrutější zločiny, které jsou horší, než byly zločiny fašismu.
It is an international fraud and cynical mockery to call these cruel crimes worse than the crimes of fascism the rights of the child.
Ve skutečnosti jde o nejbrutálnější bezpráví a zločiny proti dětem, zločiny proti lidskosti.
In fact, this is the most brutal injustice and crimes against children, crimes against humanity.
Masoví vrazi OSN by měli být postaveni před Mezinárodní soud v Hágu, tak jako váleční zločinci v Norimberku.
These mass murderers, representatives of the United Nations, should be brought before the International Court of Justice in The Hague, like the war criminals once at Nuremberg.
Tyto dny poprvé rodičovské organizace světa ukázali na skutečného viníka současné genocidy dětí, kterým je satanská a genocidní organizace OSN.
For the first time these days, parents' organizations worldwide have named the real culprit in the current genocide of children, the satanic and genocidal United Nations organization.
Byzantský katolický patriarchát vyzývá tuto antihumánní organizaci. Okamžitě zrušte zločinné juvenální projekty genocidy dětí.
The Byzantine Catholic Patriarchate appeals to this anti-human organization. Immediately withdraw the criminal juvenile projects for genocide of children.
Okamžitě zrušte nadnárodní zločinecký a pirátský systém juvenilní justice.
Immediately abolish the supranational criminal and piratical juvenile justice system.
Okamžitě zastavte genocidní zločiny sociálních služeb na dětech a jejich rodičích.
Immediately stop the genocidal crimes committed by the social services against children and their parents.
Byzantský katolický patriarchát dále vyzývá všechny země světa, pokud OSN nezastaví tuto genocidní mašinerii Radikálně se od tohoto zločineckého systému oddělte.
Furthermore, the Byzantine Catholic Patriarchate calls upon all countries of the world, unless the United Nations stops this genocidal machine, radically break with this criminal system.
Vyzýváme všechny národy, nepřijmejte z OSN žádné programy, ani žádné rekomendace a konvence.
We call on all the peoples, do not accept any programs, recommendations or conventions of the United Nations.
Neupravujte podle nich své zákony a konstituce.
Do not amend your laws and constitutions in accordance with them.
Nepřijmejte žádné idášské dotace.
Do not accept Judas subsidies.
Mezinárodní organizace OSN se stala zločineckou a satanistickou organizací, která vede národy k masové genocidě.
The International United Nations Organization has become a criminal and satanic organization that leads the nations to mass genocide.
OSN maskuje zločiny proti lidskosti, nejtěžší bezpráví a brutální krádeže dětí pozitivními frázemi o právech dětí a jejich ochraně.
The United Nations disguises crimes against humanity, gross injustice and the brutal stealing of children with positive phrases like rights of children or child protection.
Jak se mají zachovat rodiče proti vrahům svých dětí?
How should parents act towards the murderers of their children?
Drazí otcové a matky, v žádném případě nezabíjejte v zoufalství své děti a nepáchejte sebevraždy.
Dear fathers and mothers, do not by any means kill your children in despair and do not commit suicide.
Sjednoťte se a zakládejte proti teroristům takzvaných sociálních služeb ozbrojené záchranné skupiny.
Join hands and form armed rescue groups against the terrorists of the so-called social services.
Za žádnou cenu si nenechte ukrást děti.
Do not let them steal your children at any price.
Pokud budete bránit své dítě a juvenální piráti vás přitom zabijí, pak umíráte jako hrdinové a patří vám čest.
If you will defend your children and juvenile pirates will kill you, you will be dying as heroes and honor is due to you.
Postavte se proti zločinům satanizace vašich dětí bestiálním juvenilním systémem.
Rise in protest against the crime of satanization of your children by this bestial juvenile system.
O vás pak platí Kristovo slovo. Nikdo nemá větší lásku než ten, kdo dává život za své přátele, za své děti.
The words of Christ will then be true about you. No one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends, for one's children.
Jan 15:13.
Gospel of John chapter 15.
Tu jde o život věčný pro vás i vaše děti.
What is at stake here is your and your children's eternal life.
Nebojte se ztratit život pro Boží zákony a své děti.
Do not be afraid to lose your own life for the sake of God's laws and your children.
Bůh vám v hodinu vaší smrti dá věčný život ve své slávě.
In the hour of death, God will give you eternal life in His glory.
Heslo za Boha a za děti.
The motto for God and for children.
Welcome back to the UK Column Live, broadcasting over TNS and on the ukcolumn.org website. If you're liking what we're doing, please subscribe so we can continue what we're doing, making videos and producing the paper. over really, I suppose, now to Yvonne.
Well, just before we introduce our guests, and I'm going to say that we're still having a few technical problems, but we think we've got our guests with us. I'm just going to pop up a slide of the gentleman who was talking in the film, Elijah. And I would like to say that this film was forwarded on to me by Yvonne, who's going to come on the show shortly. It's, I believe, an extraordinarily good short film clip talking about what's happening with the children, and I think this man is particularly brave for speaking out in the manner that he's done that. And of course, one of the key things is that he's following it through. He's not just talking about problems with children's services, he's not just talking about children being stolen, he's actually pointing a finger at where this policy is coming from. And that policy comes back to the United Nations agenda on so-called rights of the child. And I think this is an extremely important part, and we're going to be touching on this a bit in a moment. So we'll make sure that you can find the film clip. You may want to listen to it again. I can say to you that I've listened to it 3 times, and each time I picked up something else that that gentleman had covered. Okay, well, welcome into the show this afternoon, and we should have Yvonne there. Are you there, Yvonne?
Here, thank you, Brian, yeah.
Okay, well, of course, Yvonne, you've been with us before, so thank you very much for coming back on the show. You're up there in Cumbria. What's the weather like today?
Oh, well, just looking out of the window, it's overcast, but the sun is trying to come out.
That's the best way weather reports are done. That's how Brian does it, delivers his new weather reports every day. So that's the best way to do it.
Intermittent showers.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Okay, and we should have Sheena on the phone. Are you here, Sheena?
Yeah, I'm here, Brian.
Okay, so as viewers can see, I'm holding my phone. We hope the connection stays. I'll just pop up a photograph of you so that we can all see who you are. So this is Sheena Williams. Sheena, just give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Okay. I am a mother. I have 6 children, and I became an elected councillor in 2007. And I agreed to stand to become elected councillor for one reason only, really, to stop children being stolen for a forced adoption, fingerprinting of children in school biometrically without the parents' consent, contact databases that they're collecting all these details on children without their parents' knowledge in a lot of cases, and sharing the data. And I had been asked before, but I'd said no, and on this occasion I said yes. And what they did when I tried to raise all these questions and queries was take my 4 granddaughters for forced adoption. Basically, they kidnapped them.
Right. Now, you've been a councillor. You're not a councillor at the moment, are you?
No.
No, okay. What was your experience of trying to deal with some of these issues as a councillor? Did that give you sort of leverage? Did it give you some power to try and do things in the establishment?
Absolutely none at all. What I found was that the officers run the councils, not the councillors. The councillors are literally just put there for show, in my opinion, and a lot of the councillors will turn a blind eye to anything other than, deal with any real problems. They just are walked completely over, or at least I was, and I was actually shifted off of things like scrutiny committee that I put myself on to scrutinise, and I was stopped from asking questions. The last thing they want is somebody like me or Yvonne going in there and raising these issues. They would prefer to keep them buried.
Yes. Now, you were kind enough to get in contact with me in the early days, following seeing some of the reports that I'd done on Common Purpose, and that then led us to start talking about other issues, including what was happening with children. So I'm going to thank you, because you taught me a lot about that side. You've stayed very much a campaigner, and I'm just going to bring up a picture here of you, I think it was at Trafalgar Square in London. in 2010 where there was one of the rallies on child abuse. Now, unfortunately, I'm not able to bring up the sound on this clip. I can only show a still. Can you give us a little bit of an idea about of what you were talking about when you did that demonstration?
Yes, I went to the demonstration because you know, I wanted to meet other people that were suffering the same as what I was, and I was just incensed. So I stood up there and I told the world what happened and how the social services had, you know, so they didn't contact me because I'd moved, or I could have moved, which of course I couldn't move without them knowing. I'd actually looked after my granddaughters twice before because my daughter had had problems, and I found that the services that we'd received was absolutely diabolical. So I stood up under Trafalgar Square, and you can see that on YouTube if you tap in Sheena Speaks at the child abuse rally. You can see what I said, and I named my granddaughters because I'm not gagged. They threw me out of the court basically because I wouldn't have psychological testing. What happens is they try to bully you into having these psychological testing, you know, offering you anybody that you choose to psychologically test you. But why should you be, you know, why should they have any right to make anybody be psychologically tested when they're the ones that should be having it, in my opinion?
Yeah. Okay, so you've stayed very much a campaigner, and I know that you're working with many other people via the internet, and you're also still speaking out publicly, so well done for that. Now what I'm going to do is just give Yvonne, Yvonne, the opportunity to just introduce herself again for us. And then what I'd like to do is lead off with a couple of articles that I've pulled out of the paper, because I think at the moment that there is an attempt by the media to put a smokescreen over what's really been happening, not only with child abuse in this country and the actions of social services, but also what's been happening with Jimmy Savile. So if you'll let me, I'll gently sort of lead through the subjects, and then we'll get you both to comment. But Yvonne, are you still there?
Again, it's less than a month since I was on the UK column, Brian. Just listening to what Sheena had to say, I had very similar experiences in the council here over 17 years. I've been on scrutiny committees and various other committees, and they don't want to hear the truth. There's a cover-up of this from bottom all the way to the top and back down again. It's even my own MP, who is no longer my MP because I've sacked him, mentioned that there seems to be some kind of a conspiracy theory, and I believe that the MPs know perfectly well what's happening and what's going on.
Right, okay. Thank you for that, Yvonne. Well, I'll just say that, of course, the government loves to use the word theory. The moment you come up with something that's against government policy, up pops the word theory. But, of course, we've just heard the priest talking in another country. I think he's speaking from Ukraine. Although he's talking about what's happening in Finland and Norway and other countries in Europe. But here we've got somebody who is totally divorced from us, at distance in another country, and that individual is talking exactly the same thing, that children are being unlawfully taken, and it's to a programme. And we know, of course, this is happening and being reported in many other countries, so not only in Europe but also in Canada and America, Australia, for example.
Yes.
Yeah.
We've got a huge international row developing from where I'm sitting at the moment, and the material I'm looking at. We've got the Slovak and the Italian government involved now in taking the UK government to court in The Hague with relation to the child stealing of their own citizens that's going on in the UK. Coupled with that, we've got this priest in Finland that's spoken out, and it's quite graphic and it's quite scary, I would think, for a lot of people to listen. Nevertheless, he's telling the truth. Now, the MPs in Parliament have been lobbied time and time again, not just by myself, but by many other campaigners, en masse. The whole lot of them have been aware of this. They've had several exposés on this, and every time the answer is we can't get involved in individual cases, which is again what the government are now putting out. We can't consider individual cases. We've got the UK government now insulting the Italians, all over Europe, and saying that this hasn't happened. Complete denial that they're in. And of course, they're having to lie through the skin of their teeth, because if this does get out to the masses, the game's over. The game's completely over.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with that, and we've pulled out some slides and some images which are going to allow us to get through some of those topics that you've raised there. What I'd like to do is just call up these two newspaper articles, which I just decided to put up because it gives us a little bit of initial focus on, I think, how the establishment is trying to deal with the evidence of these abuses that's coming forward. Now, this is the Express. I hope you can see this on screen. For those who are just listening, it's an Express article, and it's saying that the number of trafficking cases is rising. That's the headline. And it goes on to say the number of people being trafficked into the UK is rising. A report published by the Interdepartmental Ministerial Group on Human Trafficking found that 946 potential victims of human trafficking were referred to the National Referral Mechanism last year. Now, I find this article particularly interesting because it's clearly suggesting that all the bad guys are outside the country. It's the bad people who are out of UK who are actually trafficking people into the UK. And the other thing which I find particularly interesting is the politically correct speak. We're talking about national referral mechanisms. I don't know what that is, but it doesn't sound to be very crunchy to me. And if we just look at the second one, this is doing the same thing, I think. This one's from the Mail, but it's saying that a fifth of child sex offenders who travel abroad end up working in jobs that involve children. I find this a particularly interesting headline because, of course, the fact is that paedophiles will go flat out to work with children, whether they're abroad or whether they're actually working in Britain. And the UK column and other people have been reporting for nearly a year now of the fact that child abusers have been operating as just one example inside Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. And despite the fact it's known they're there, there's been little attempt to root them out. If I just put up this man, it'll probably focus attention. It's a report on Jimmy Savile, and of course this particular one is saying that Janet Street Porter had heard the rumours about Jimmy Savile, but of course there wasn't enough substance there to do anything about it. Sorry, Sheena, could I ask you, what's your thought on the Jimmy Savile case?
Well, I think this is the tip of a vast iceberg. I think the Jimmy Savile thing is basically put out somebody that's already dead, possibly bumped off to keep it all quiet, but it's absolutely endemic. I mean, I believe that they're in the councils, they're in the social services, they're in the NHS, they're in our schools. We actually have a massive paedophile problem controlling everything, and I think it's to do with these secret societies, the Three Masons. Everybody's covering up for everybody. So if you looked at a bracelet of interlocking rings, I think we'd get closer to the truth. And once this is exposed, everything will collapse. The banking industry, the government, the whole lot will come down because it's vast.
We had that report yesterday, didn't we, of that Dominic Strauss, what was his name? I can't remember. Dominic Strauss, the IMF guy, who he's admitted to, about the parties, the eyes wide shut kind of parties that he attended. Yeah, so we got the head of the International Monetary System, who's basically now been reported in the press that
it goes along the lines that men of a certain stature and position of power need to actually attend parties of this nature, and what we're talking about is with prostitutes. And then he goes a step further and suggests that, well, if people have a look at the film Eyes Wide Shut, they can understand what he really gets involved in. Did you see or have you heard of that report, Sheena?
I haven't had time yet, but I'd like to add something to what I just said. Even at a local level, when I was a counsellor, there was a particular counsellor that was it was alleged that he was downloading child pornography on his laptop, and this was confirmed to me by a member of staff that it had mucked up all of our computers. But when I tried to raise this, because although I was elected on a by-election and I won that seat apparently for the Conservatives, first time in the history of ever, and I believe you're selected, not elected. When I raised this issue with the Conservatives, and he was a Lib Dem, he was a magistrate and a governor of an infant school, I was told that, no, we're not raising this issue, we're keeping it, all under wraps. And I said, is that because people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones? But it later came out in the press that he was done for soliciting prostitution. It didn't say the age, but the interesting bit for me was that the fellow that told me about how I knew this, apart from the staff member, was another counsellor who was a magistrate, and he was a Lib Dem, and there was also a lady who was a Lib Dem who was having an affair with the Conservative leader, who happens to be a Freemason. They were both confessed to by this particular gentleman that he had been downloading child porn, but of course he confessed before he got off with it, if that makes sense. And of course it was all buried and covered up.
Yeah, which seems to be the common pattern.
Yeah.
Yvonne, if I can come back to you, what are your thoughts on the Jimmy Savile affair?
Well, I think, as Sheena has suggested, it's the tip of a very huge iceberg, and I think a lot more will come out if we can keep the ball rolling on getting information out into the public domain over this. The BBC is clearly dipping its toes in the water and quickly taking them back out again, which is nothing more than we would expect from the BBC. But I don't think they're going to be able to cover this up. It was interesting listening to Bill Malone speaking on your recent show with regard to Haute de Garenne and saying that Jimmy Savile was a regular visitor there. And of course, there's a media block out there. They're doing their best to stop journalists going over there and reporting what's going on. We've got Kevin Annett, who's exposing all the stuff with the residential schools in Canada and America, genocide literally of the native people there. I've done quite a lot of looking into the Tavistock Institute's endeavours in Australia with the breeding out policies with and the genocide again of the Aboriginals. And I think the paedophilia is nothing more than a way to control elites at the top of the chain who make very powerful decisions connected to this social engineering and eugenics program, as right. I can see it. I really feel that if you can compromise leaders in the government in particular, high flyers, compromise them with discretions with children, very, very easy to control and get the kind of agendas pushed through that you want.
Right.
I just want to say somebody's made a good point in the chat box that they're making out that this was a problem in the past, and there isn't, and it's with elderly people as well, and it was a problem back in the 80s. They're not addressing that this could be still going on in Britain today. Well,
this is a very important point, Lou. Thank you, whoever sent that in to us, because we agree. We think that what is actually being done, it's very subtle, it's very carefully done at the moment, but we see the establishment already trying to blur the Jimmy Savile case. It was something that went on then. The hint is it doesn't go on today. Oh yes, that was the swinging 60s. We're now much more sober. So thank you for that comment. I'm just going to pull up on screen here a picture of Jimmy Savile in very close proximity to Esther Ranson. Just in a couple of sentences, Yvonne, if I may, what do you think of Esther Ranson?
I think that she, from day one, I mean, I had young children when Esther Ranson brought in this Childline, and I was suspect of it from day one. I've been and had a recent look on the site, and they're encouraging children to dob the parents in and keep secrets from their parents. I think this is very, very dangerous ground, and I think Esther Ranson, in my opinion, all along has been a front runner for recruiting children for elite paedophiles, along with Jimmy Savile. And the crocodile tears coming from her do not register with me at all.
Sorry,
yeah,
I'm sorry to butt in
you
again.
go.
Sorry,
Go.
But then you were talking about the BBC as well. You've got their main programme, their main kids programme that goes out every day just as the kids come in. It's a programme called Tracy Beaker that glorifies life in a children's home and says how parents are bad and what fun it is to live in a children's home. Which is
serious stuff, isn't it?
It's really serious stuff.
Just for viewers, and I'll describe it for listeners. Where this is a photograph of the Childline website. It's very interesting to me. I can understand that if you have a website that's there for children in distress to call, you've got to make it an attractive site. But I don't know, there's something about this website. It's full of adverts. It's talking about create and make films. And the interesting thing is that, of course, if you follow Childline through, you're not actually dealing with Childline anymore. You're coming into the NSPCC. And what I discovered recently is that if you now follow what happens when you go in through Childline, ultimately, who do they contact? Well, they contact social services, and that means that a child is brought directly back into the control of social services and child services. They're not actually dealing with an independent charity. Sheena, I don't know whether you'd like to comment on that. What's your opinion of Childline and NSPCC?
I think all of them, including Bernardo's and any of these children's charities that have been set up, are just government fronts. Looking into this over the last 10 years, it seems to me that that's all they are. They're not put there to actually help the children, although they may help a small percentage of children. I think these are just government fronts to put the illusion of child protection out there, because, you know, when you see things like what I experienced as a counsellor, when somebody came to me, I was helping to fund a children's like youth club thing, and somebody come to me about a man being face painting these children without a CRB check, and it turns out that he was being shadowed by the counsellor and his wife, the actual same counsellor that I took the seat off of, actually. And then I complained to everybody under the sun, and all you'll find is that you're complaining to common purpose graduates. And then later on, a year after I left, I found that Anne Widdicombe had inadvertently, this is the MP who stood down, had inadvertently given this fellow a new identification via her assistant, the same assistant I went to for help. So all of these charities are no different. They're all just fronts, as far as I can see. The MPs, the Lords, they're all in on it, and I want to know what conflicts of interest they've got. Have they got, interest in these charities that have been set up? Yep. Who's behind these charities? Are any of these MPs, do they come from social worker backgrounds? Because we know they do. Do they help fund children's homes, or are they getting funding from children's homes? I think once we get all of this declaration of interest, because all elected councillors, apart from parish councillors, are corporate parents and are vicariously liable. And what we need is to have all these declarations out there for the world to see, no matter how small. If the councillor's wife is a social worker in the same council, we need to know. And the same with all these charities. They're all fronts as far as I'm concerned.
And I think, Sheena, you've also done some considerable research, which is starting to show you that some of the big banking names seem to have a little bit of a too close relationship with children's charities and things.
Yes, that's to do with the some research that I did onto the Caldecott Foundation in Kent, and Yvonne's put some things together on that. But when I looked into it, I actually found that one of the trustee, or he was a Rothschild's media. His name was Jonathan Payne, and he was an investment banker, and he was currently chaired not now, but I think he did then, the global media team at Rothschild's, where he spent most of his time arranging mergers and acquisitions for companies involved in the world of films and TV, newspapers and publishing.
Yeah.
So if you're in that and then you've worked in the investment banking industry, that covers a hell of a lot of sort of positions.
Yeah, we're also seeing international banking organisations taking over children's homes because of the amount of profit that can be made off them. So
well, it's massive child trafficking. That's what's going on. It's a business, and it's being run as a business by all of these secret societies within all of these councils, within the police. Common Purpose is a secret society as far as I'm concerned. And when I tried to complain, if you recall, I was on the phone to you one day when I had two plainclothes. Turns out that they were detective inspectors, we think, at my door. And when I complained to the Kent Chief Constable, his name was Mike Fuller, it turns out he was a Common Purpose graduate. I got absolutely nowhere, even through the Information Commissioner. And then Michael Fuller got promoted to become the Chief Inspector of the Crown Prosecution Service by the Baroness of Scotland.
Right.
Our former Chief Executive of Maidstone was David Pepford, Common Purpose graduate, head of legal team, Common Purpose graduate.
Yeah.
The people that I complained about this paedophile, I didn't know it was a paedophile till a year later when it came out into the papers, that Anne Widdecombe inadvertently gave a new ID to, and the judge had to go at her, Kent County Council, because he'd also become a foster carer.
Yeah.
Who had approved him? And it turns out who I complained to, guess what they was? Common Purpose graduate.
Right. Okay. What I'm just going to do is come back onto this business that what we're really looking at here is we know children are being taken, we know children are being abused, we know the trafficking is going on, we know children are being trafficked out of care homes. This has been revealed in Rochdale. It's also been revealed in Operation Bullfinch paedophile roundup in Oxfordshire. So we're constantly seeing children that are trafficked out of the care system, but nobody in the care system is ever, to my knowledge, brought to book properly, brought into court, tried and sentenced. They always just seem to be sacked or moved sideways. But the BBC is particularly interesting in the way it's reacting over Jimmy Savile. We know from Bill Maloney from Pie and Mash Films that, of course, Savile, it wasn't just a question that Savile was abusing children. What he was doing was helping to procure children for other people. We've now seen the BBC, first of all, sort of deny that anything was going on. Investigative programme was blocked. And then we've seen more of the BBC statements with this business. Well, it was something that did go on. So it was quite extraordinary. But the other morning, Mike was in his car, and he listened to an interview from this lady. And what I'd like to do is pass Mike over. Are you happy just to describe what you heard?
Okay, so Janet Street Porter. It was actually last night on the way home. So this was. Right. Just before the PM programme, and they were talking about the BBC's coverage of the Jimmy Savile issue. And I'm just going to play a quick clip. We don't normally play material from the BBC, but I thought in this case it warranted it, so just hold on a wee second.
Janet, a street porter, what do you make of the way the BBC's handled this?
Well, it's a classic way that they usually handle these things, which is to, instead of setting the agenda about how a story is broken and containing it, they react on a day-by-day basis. And when I was an executive there in 1988 and I worked alongside you, I think you'll agree with me, they haven't really learnt a lot in the intervening 24 years. Doesn't it show... Sorry to interrupt, Steve. I just want to say one thing, that Chris Patton And George Entwistle said they want to slim down the top layers of the BBC. Well, here we've got a classic reason why they should as soon as possible. And Mark Thompson said the same thing when he was DJ. Because all these labyrinthine systems of reporting, here we have a scandal that can't be contained because the flow of information is so complex.
Well, except that they say actually it isn't that complex.
So what we have there, you showed a slide earlier on where Janet Street Porter was reported in the paper as having known, as stating that she had known what was going on in the 1980s with Jimmy Savile. And now she's come out on BBC Radio yesterday afternoon saying that it's ridiculous that the BBC hasn't learned how to grab hold of the agenda to contain the story. And she's saying this is a great opportunity to get rid of some of the management within the BBC because they failed to contain the story.
Yeah, so she's advocating basically a cover-up.
Correct.
Of what has gone on in the BBC. It's not how do we get the BBC more open so that we can really find out what Savile was doing and who he was working with. Janet Street Porter is advocating we need to get policy correct so that we can contain the damage. Yeah. Yvonne, are you there? Are you there, Yvonne?
Do you want me to talk some more about Caldecott?
No, well, what I'd like to do is I've got a slide here which is the UK, sorry, it's the Telegraph saying that a foreign government may take the UK to Europe over illegal child snatching. And this,
that's right.
Yeah, this brings us back to your comment a few minutes ago about charges by the Slovakian government that children were being stolen by the British government.
Yes.
Let me just call up two more bits of information and then I'll come back for your comment. Oh, we're not doing well today, are we? Let me just clean that one up a second. Hold on. We'll do it live. This is UK column. I'll have to get rid of this. Let's come back. There we are. That's how it's done behind the scenes in UK column live. This is a report by a Slovakian English news paper, and the report is saying that today the British government has released the following statement in reaction to information published in the Slovak media. And it's essentially, we strongly rebut the allegations against the social services in the UK made by the Slovak media. Social services in the UK are among the best regulated in the world. So that's what the British government has just told the Slovakian government. So what would be your comment on that, Yvonne?
Well, I think it's absolutely shocking and shame. They're shameless. I mean, we've got David Ward MP coming on telling the Slovakian people that are resident in the UK, don't go back to Slovakia. You know, we've got foreign nationals running away from our shores at the moment, frightened because their children are being stolen from them in very ridiculous situations. Their babies are being snatched from them. They're being held in the UK when clearly the embassies and the governments of the member states concerned should have involvement. The British government is running roughshod over every single bit of legislation that it's signed up to, ratified itself up to. It's an absolute sham.
Right.
And how insulting for the Slovakian government, the Italian government, because the Italian embassy are already involved as well, over a gentleman called Remis Bianchi, who's lost 2 children. We've got a great man that I speak to regularly that's also linking me up with people in the EU. This is how I got my hands on the video.
Okay, Yvonne, let me just call up. I've got a picture for viewers here of David Ward MP. This is obviously a still shot from a YouTube interview that he did where he was also completely rubbishing the accusations made by the Slovakian government. So in this little clip he's being interviewed by somebody local. It's in the Midlands somewhere, I've forgotten the exact location. But what we've done is we've just got a little audio clip of of David Ward commenting. So you'll hear David Ward speak. There's a little bit of translation. It doesn't last very long. And then we've taken another little clip. So let's hear what this British politician has to say when an overseas government accused Britain of effectively stealing children.
The first thing to stress when dealing with children and the social services that operate in this country, the taking into care of a child is the very, very last resort. The interests of the child, first and foremost, are taken into account, and in nearly every single case, the best place for a child will always be deemed to be with the parents of that child. Back in parent.
Okay, well, there we have it. Could you hear that one okay, Yvonne?
I didn't hear that at all, but I know what's on it.
Well, basically, he says it's all rubbish, it's all lies, it's all not true. And
let me tell you, we've lobbied the government, and lobbied the government. They're in denial, but they know perfectly well what's going on. They're liars. I'm calling them liars now. I'm going to call my own MP, Tim Farron, who was my MP, isn't anymore, a liar and covering up and complicit with child abuse and child trafficking. I'm going to call David Ward a liar, and I'm going to call, who is the third one I want to call, Lib Dem. I'm going to say that John Hemming, and I don't want to give him too much credence, is a front man for all this. They're all Liberal Democrats. I've heard reports lately about Vince Cable, links with things that aren't too savoury as well, and I think the whole bubble's bursting here. Okay. Now, they're all welcome to challenge me in the courts because I can evidence their lies, so it's up to them. But they're lying through the skin of their teeth. They're insulting the British people. They're insulting the European Union citizens as well. And it's about time that they came down off their arrogant high horse and accepted what's going on and did something about it.
Well, I think they know exactly what's going on, and the reason they don't want to do anything about it is because that would be the lid off the can. And
this is the business. And looking in history, when the local authority takeover was, we're looking at 1929. The Conservative government did away with boards of guardians. We've got boards of guardians again now. Yep. I can see history repeating itself, right up to the lead up to the war and right beyond. And this is all Tavistock. What anybody wants to say, go and have a look. You'll find it yourselves. If you look at these dates.
Okay, Yvonne, I'm just going to remind viewers and listeners that, of course, in the clip that we had at the beginning of this part of the show, the priest was following it through. Why were these children being taken? And he's pointing the finger at UN policy. And I'm going to say that we can't cover this in detail yet, but the UK column and other people are investigating this aspect. Because we clearly see that it is UN policy which is now driving the public sector in UK. Mike, you've got a comment there.
Yes, I would just encourage everybody, if they don't have already got a copy of the latest copy of the column newspaper, to get a copy of it, because Martin Edwards and I did an article about where this UN policy originates from. Right.
Okay. Now, I'll just say to Sheena, we haven't forgotten you, Sheena, and I'm going to come on to you specifically. Just got one more thing for Yvonne. I'm keeping an eye on the clock as well, because we've got about 16 minutes to go. I took a little screenshot for you, Yvonne, of a demonstration in Rome. This is to do with a family, an Italian a family in Brighton that have had problems with social services. Can you tell us a little bit more about this one? I think you know something about it.
Well, basically, he's got the. I've helped him a little bit. I haven't been able to help him as much as I would have liked to, and I do apologise to him for that. He is. He's the one who has managed to get this attention from the Italian consul as well, which all adds weight to what the priest in Finland and the Slovakian government are doing. What we need is a concerted effort. But there's something strange about this as well, which I'd like to mention. We've not that long ago, I did a couple of years ago with Florence Ballone, a journalist from Belgium. We did something with John Hemming out of Brendan Fleming's office in Birmingham with regard to the child stealing and the state of affairs then. I find it rather rich that we've got huge paedophile rings operating in Belgium and a similar thing going on in Belgium, and yet the Belgian press are interested in what's happening in the UK. It's like, oh, the dirty devils of the UK, and of course the government in denial, but it takes a lot of light away from what's happening European-wide. And these paedophile rings are operating European-wide, and obviously involve some of the high players in the government. I've got a list of people. I won't go through the list now, but you know, just for an example of one person's name, Baron Benoit of Bonvoisin, which is, you know, obviously part of the nobility. We've got the Mountbatten family involved with Caldecott House, Prince Philip trying to raise funds, and the lady who organised Caldecott House was Tavistock.
Yeah.
So basically what's happening is huge social experiments going on, originally against the working people with the poor laws, etc., taking children and feeling that they're in the best interest of the child. We institutionalise them and they get a better start because the parents are poverty-stricken and can't provide for them properly. Right. The same kind of attitude we have now towards single mothers in the system. And they're going into these big homes. These big homes, the children are made available to whoever wants to molest them. And this has been historical. This is nothing new.
And we're not seeing any concerted effort by any, well, we have one or two MPs who seem to be doing something, but the overwhelming bulk of the MPs are clearly doing nothing, or they are actually running away from the subject. I know that when I've actually attempted to speak to MPs about what's going on, you get the arrogant little laugh and then they simply run away from you.
That's
Whereas
right, that's correct.
The evidence is there. Now, I'm just going to come across to Sheena. Are you still there, Sheena?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, you have to speak up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm here.
You've mentioned Common Purpose. Common Purpose, obviously a charity. It's a very interesting organisation because it's so heavily involved politically. Of course, when we come on to the subject of the abuse of children, there have been instances where some very nasty people have cropped up in the Common Purpose networks. And what interested me in the early days, of course, was that Common Purpose as a charity was heavily involved in targeting school children, some of them very young. That would make them attractive to paedophiles, and also operating what can only be described as secretive networks for the Common Purpose graduates. That would also be attractive for paedophiles. And of course we eventually had two particularly vile cases. I'll just call up a picture. James Rennie, who was involved with a group of men who were abusing very young children, and the gentleman on the right, Matthew Byrne, was involved in some really quite horrific activities, including with prostitutes. If you look him up on the internet, you can read the mainstream stories at the time. I'm not going to go into detail about what he was doing because it was too vile. But if we stick with Matthew Byrne, both these two were Common Purpose graduates selected as future leaders. But Matthew Byrne is of great interest because he was actually on a Common Purpose advisory board up in Merseyside, so he was mixing with very senior people in the local community. I believe one of them at the time was a senior police officer who was sat on the advisory board, and the role of the Common Purpose advisory board is of course to approve others to be selected as Common Purpose trained leaders. And what I could easily imagine, of course, that Matthew Byrne would be looking to select more of his own kind in order to join him in his deeds. And it gets more interesting. It's a poor quality photograph because it was very small, But at a particular time, David Cameron was here photographed alongside Matthew Byrne. Michael Heseltine was there. Now, this was awarding this man a medal for his work in his youth work. But one has to actually ask, you know, exactly what background checks have been done on these sorts of people. And this is an email from Common Purpose Merseyside. They'd been asked by a member of the public what checks they'd actually done on Matthew Byrne's background. And essentially they sidestepped the issue. What they said is Matthew Byrne's profile has never been publicly promoted on our website. His profile existed alongside thousands of other alumni profiles in the participant and alumni area of our website, commonpurpose360.org, and was not publicly accessible. Once formal legal charges were made against Matthew Byrne, he stepped down from Common Purpose Merseyside Advisory Group, and his profile was removed from the Common Purpose 360 website referenced previously. And then it goes on to say, Common Purpose has taken no further action beyond the steps outlined, as Matthew Byrne is not an employee of this organisation, and it would not have been appropriate to do so. It goes on to say that Common Purpose advisory groups operate in an advisory capacity to the charity. They have no legal, financial or managerial responsibility for Common Purpose, nor are they representative bodies. Now, my point on this is that surely if you discover a particularly dangerous paedophile in your networks, you've got a duty to actually find out where that man had been operating, who he'd been in contact with, and whether your secretive networks have actually been penetrated by paedophiles. But none of that was done. We've got 9 minutes to go, Sheena. What's your comment on what we've just shown on screen?
Well, on the Common Purpose, it's pretty obvious that a lot of these MPs, I think all the MPs, all the lords, everybody, they've all been compromised. If they wasn't compromised, I don't believe they'd be in those positions. Because if they wasn't compromised, they would be screaming it from the rooftops like me and Yvonne. So I think that's why everybody's staying nice and quiet. And I think Common Purpose is, obviously they use NLP, but I think you've got to look at a bigger picture as well here, Brian. What about the MK Ultra? The stuff that's coming out of the Tavistock Institute and all the rest of it. There's lots of it going on.
Well,
so Common Purpose is just one section of it, and that's bad enough without all the rest of it put together.
Yeah, well, certainly an NLP specialist who has been of considerable help in explaining what can be done with NLP. We know that good things can be done with NLP, but we also know that in the wrong hands, this type of psychological manipulation is extremely valuable to people who want to select and groom children. And if you have adults working in a secretive way in networks and they have access to children, that's one thing. But of course we know that in Sheffield, Common Purpose was running courses amongst school children where people had not been CRB checked. So we are not saying, of course, that Common Purpose is an organisation that promotes paedophiles. What we're actually saying is Common Purpose, by its secretive nature and the fact that people are not declaring that they're there, is particularly vulnerable to being penetrated itself by paedophiles.
You're right, Brian, but what we need is full disclosure for all of these organisations. I mean, every single one from these are public servants. We're forgetting one big thing here. These MPs are supposed to serve us. We are the public, they are the servant. And exactly the same with all of these organisations, including the councils and the authorities. We have no separation between the judiciary and the executive. What we have is the authorities going into these courts, rubber stamping everything. Children's orders, it doesn't matter what you're in there for, they're in secret. And forced adoption, in my opinion, is a front. Although they've kidnapped my granddaughters, it is a front. I wouldn't trust these people, these adoption agencies or the councils, to take, to look after my dog, let alone a child or their details. We have no idea when these children go for these forced adoptions or whatever they're going for, that they've actually gone. They could be anywhere. And until we have criminal courts with juries, not closed, secret secret courts. You can have the children's names in there as initials, but we need the criminal courts to deal with these cases, because it's all happening in secret, it's all happening in quiet. Until we have full disclosure who are amongst these secret societies, be it common purpose, Freemasons, any of them, we're not going to get to the bottom of it. We have to have full disclosure from our public servants right the way across the board.
Yeah.
Let's see who's been compromised. Let's get all of these whistleblowers, like Bill said the other day with paedophiles. Well, let's have the social workers. Let's give a couple of them amnesty for speaking out. Let's have the judges. Let's have at least one decent judge out there that speaks out. Because the reason I think we're not getting that is because they're all in these secret societies.
Yeah, and they're either in secret societies and involved and bound by the rules of those secret societies, or we've actually got the unpalatable position, and I personally believe this, and I know that many victims of abuse certainly believe it, that we have got paedophiles that are now in the highest positions of power. They are MPs, they're lords, they're judges, and they're very powerful people within the monetary system.
The system would have collapsed a long time ago. This has been going on for eons. It's been kept under wraps deliberately. It's a system, but this system is collapsing around their ears as we speak. There's more and more people coming forward. There's more and more people that are speaking out about this and explaining what's happened. And what I would say to any families out there is a site called What Do They Know, where you could actually go on and request information and find out a lot of information. Common Purpose is listed on there in multiple places. And these families, the first thing they do is terrify these families into silence. Before they get chance to gag you, before they get tell the world and tell your neighbours, tell everybody what's going on. Do not stay quiet, because I was advised by Anne Widdicombe's assistant to stay quiet. They were sorting all this out not to go to the press, because if I went to the press, I was told by the leader of Kent County Council, Paul Carter, if I went to the press, they would label me mad. So do the opposite to what they're telling you to do. Tell your friends, tell your families, and protect your children. And I home educate my children, and I was told to keep that quiet when I was a counsellor by the leader of the council at the time, because Paul Carter also told me that he didn't approve of it.
Right.
Now,
Sheena, sorry, just to interject there, because the time is racing away now. I just wanted to give a mention here to Kevin Annett. We're going to put his picture up on screen. This is an American pastor who's been working for many years to expose the abuse of Canadian Indian children. So what has this man done? He's spoken out about the terrible abuse, which he's now produced irrefutable evidence for, against thousands of children in Canada. He's been beaten up, he's been hounded out of his job, he's had his marriage broken up. And what has now happened is that this lady, Theresa May, has actually blocked this man from entering Britain. So a man of the church who has been speaking out and trying to get the truth out about the abuse of children is refused entry into Britain. Now, for me, there can only be one reason why, and that is that the British state is actually frightened of this man.
I agree.
Okay, and I'll just follow that up with this is one of the organisations that I think you were mentioning, might have been Yvonne, that we have a huge number of quasi-charities which are all supposedly helping families, but more and more of them, of course, are supporting adoption. And we know that the moment children become available for fostering and adoption, huge sums of money change hands. And if I can just, in 1 minute, switch over to Yvonne, I just want to bring this lady's picture up on screen. This is Leanne Smith, the mother who killed her 2 children in Spain rather than allow social services to take them. Yvonne, would you just give us a couple of words on what you know about the background to Leanne's case?
Well, yes. We've got John Stocker, County Councillor, deeply implicated in the Leanne Smith affair up here in Cumbria, as well as Rex Toff, who conveniently has died now. he was one of the main people, I think, behind the witch hunting of her children, but he can't defend himself, a bit like Jimmy Savile. Basically, Leanne Smith was witch hunted in the same way that I was, slightly different, but they came after us because we were speaking out and trying to change what was going on. And I think this is happening to a lot of whistleblowers within the system. They're being bullied.
Okay.
The chief of Cumbria has been suspended for gross misconduct, and it is for bullying lower ranking police officers, as far as I've...
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Yvonne. Sorry,
I've also got to say thank you, Sheena. Sorry.
Can we just ask Sheena how people can get in touch with her? Should they email the column and we pass the email?
Right. Any questions for either of these two ladies, simply email editor@ukcolumn.org and we'll make sure that we pass on your questions. We believe the truth is the paedophile rings are being used to control corrupt politicians, and that is why the British establishment is so frightened of Jimmy Savile case. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thanks
you.
to TNS as well for letting us broadcast. Thank you.